Everyone, let's go to Rumble. Rumble here. Hold on. Which one is that? That's locals. And I'll give everyone the link one more time. We're starting with this. Did you, I know you're busy. Did you happen to see my interview with Steve Baker and we were discussing the raid?
Yeah, I saw part of it. And the either tomorrow as a Memorial Day special or Tuesday, hopefully I'll be live doing a special edition of What Are the Odds with Richard Barris at 2 p.m. Eastern. We got back the results from the 1776 Law Center poll survey on food freedom, medical freedom, financial freedom, political freedom, and got some great data and information, particularly how popular food freedom is and how popular certain solutions on medical freedom are. So we'll be doing a deep dive on those with Richard Barris, People's Pundit Daily, either Monday or Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Amazing. Now I'm ending it on Twitter, ending it on YouTube, and we're going to stay on Rumble and vivabarneslaw.locals.com. So ending on YouTube now and ending on Twitter now as well. And I'll post it all tomorrow. Remove. Done. All right. And we should be good on Rumble and Locals now. All right, Robert. So the news, get my hair out of my face. The news of the week that the FBI was authorized to use lethal force in their totally standard operating procedure protocol raid on a former president, leading presidential candidate. Marjorie Taylor Greene and some others were saying it's an assassination attempt. I know exactly what she means. And, I call it a passive assassination attempt, or like assassination. And then you had the lefty liars that all they do is lie. Daniel Goldman, it's just standard operating procedure. And then you had some conservatives who I think of good faith were saying, yeah, this is just a standard template. It's pre-filled out. Whenever the FBI does a raid, of course they can use lethal force. And so no biggie. It's just standard operating procedure. Robert, I had Steve Baker on. We had a good fight, a good disagreement on 3 issues. James O'Keefe, January 6th, Jake Lang, and this. I don't agree with him, and I think he's wrong. I think it's outrageous. Even if it is standard operating procedure, it's outrageous. They had the authorization to use lethal force while raiding a Secret Service protected entity, while being authorized to wear polos, plain clothes, carry guns, bring box cutters to raid the president's Mar-a-Lago property. You tell me what you think is this. Was this a passive assassination attempt? If it happens, all the better. If a shootout occurs, all the better. We can run with media. Or is this nothing to see here?
Well, as one of the commenters in the reply threads today at vivabarneslaw.locals.com pointed out, why did they have the hostage team help assigned to the case as well? So this was something where they were hoping, kind of like January 6th, they were hoping there'd be an escalation that would excuse their conduct, an escalation that would further marginalize President Trump. That they fancy and imagine him to be somebody that he's just never been. They confess through projection their own crimes onto Trump, and at the same time, they confess through projection how they would react or respond onto Trump in this situation. And so first of all, there's no precedent at all for executing a search warrant on the president of the United States, former president, future president. There's none. So anybody who said this was standard operating procedure, that's problem number 1. Problem number 2, Jack Smith, who's seeking an emergency gag order on Trump. But hey, federal judge, stop Trump from exposing the fact that we tried to kill him, by hook or by crook. Which again shows how First Amendment violating all these orders are, but also shows how their whole obsession is controlling the court of public opinion. That their goal was to hope that Trump escalated, that the Secret Service didn't go along. Like one of his lies, Jack Smith's lies to the judge, and on the issue of the gag order, was he said, "Oh, by the way, we made sure we reviewed this with Trump's counsel before we did anything." And it's true that the warrant told them to do that. That's what they promised the judge in getting the warrant. But that is, in fact, not what they did.
Well, Robert, that was my question. Like, I don't even know who to ask these questions to. Oh, they were collaborating between Secret Service and Trump. Then why raid? If you're in communication and you're discussing it, why do the raid?
Correct. In fact, they never told Trump's counsel before the raid. They never conferred effectively with the Secret Service before the raid. Because as you point out, there was no need for the raid. There never was any need for the raid. Trump had consistently complied with a wide range of their requests. We now know from the unsealed government court files that, in fact, the government was the one who organized these documents and sent these documents in the way they did while they were busy trying to entrap Trump. That's what the archives are up to. Shows you how corrupt our government has become, that the archivist is leading a conspiracy against a former president and future president of the United States. The archivist is the one who belongs in prison. There's a bunch of people that need to be criminally prosecuted for this. Trump took a walk on doing any of that in his first term. He can't take that walk in his second term. He said to the Libertarian Party this, see, the dog agrees.
Let me let him in here.
He said at the Libertarian Party, he wasn't always a libertarian, but he became a libertarian after 91 indictments. So I hope we see some remedy on that stage. But it's clear nothing about what the FBI did was standard operating procedure. They lied to get the warrant because they lied about how they would employ protective protocols and procedures to preclude this. And the bigger question people should be asking is, why in the world is it standard operating procedure to give people a license to kill every time they do a search warrant? Maybe that's why so many of these cases end up like a Ruby Ridge, like Waco.
Craig Robertson, the most recent one. You go and effect a raid at 6:15 in the morning on a man who you know is probably mentally unwell, paranoid, armed, instead of doing it in a passive manner that will not escalate the situation.
Exactly. I mean, they are basically inviting escalation by having this standard operating procedure of licensing lethal force. And that if this is standard operating procedure, it needs to no longer be standard operating procedure.
What was the issue? Why are they allowing them to be plain clothes, wear polos, and carry arms and box cutters? I mean, that looks like you have a gang raiding your property.
Yeah. In fact, often people pretend this happens a higher degree than people know. I represented some clients in the unauthorized product distribution business at scale. I only represented them on the tax charges. But what happened was, when they were raided, he was armed and ready to go, because one of the things they would do is people would pretend to be law enforcement and raid houses where they thought there was money and property, particularly if that person maybe didn't have, say, reported money or property, and steal it. And the best way to do it was, and this happens on fraud scams. People pretend to be the IRS and send people bogus emails and letters, and they get their money and property that way. I get those inquiries on a monthly basis where somebody says, I got a call that says I got to send this money in now or they're going to seize my account, and be like, that's not a legitimate IRS inquiry. So given that, they shouldn't be escalating like this. Search warrants should be rare. They should be exceptional and extraordinary cases, number one. And number two, there should never be a standard operating protocol to escalate. The standard operating protocol should be to de-escalate. And so it further shows the systemic, institutional corruption and fraud in the Justice Department and the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
It was Alpha Warrior who I did the interview. He was raided again at 6 a.m, where they used concussive grenades around his house, knowing that he had firearms in the house, called him to the front door. And but for the grace of God, he showed up to the front door with his phone and not a gun, not knowing what the hell was going on. It's a deliberate trigger. Whatever they did at Mar-a-Lago, again, but for the grace of God, didn't
like
go.
January 6th, they were hoping for escalation. They were seeking escalation in order to rationalize an extreme crackdown. That was goal. And anybody who doesn't see that is deaf, dumb, and blind, or is so deferential and defensive of the national security state. I would think people like Steve Baker, who got treated to standard operating protocol in an undesirable way, would be a little bit more alert to that.
No, look, he says the government's bad, but and
that's the problem. There's this on the right. There's this deference to law enforcement, deference to authority, and it's how long or how frequently do you get smacked in the face before you realize this is not legitimate authority? This is not constitutional authority. And we got to start seeing the Constitution as the authority, not just because somebody's in a robe. They got a white lab coat on. They got a nice little badge on. They got a little gavel in their hands. That isn't legitimate authority. The Constitution is legitimate authority.
Ginger Ninja has corrected me. I keep saying box cutters. It was bolt cutters, small and large bolt cutters. Giant steel padlock cutters often used by criminals. So it's even worse. I'm underselling how bad it was.
And then we get to what's going on in D.C. I mean, in New York, where the judge is going to give a jury instruction that says, even if you don't agree on what crime he committed, you can convict him.
I saw a parody of that, and it says, you decide what the crime was. And I was like, holy cow.
That's literally going to be his instruction. That's literally, you don't even have to agree what the crime was. If you agree that he did something bad, maybe, you're good to go.
Robert,
that's how rigged the trial is. And Courthouse News should be ashamed of itself for citing legal experts and judges covering for this corrupt rogue judge who doesn't need to be in a black robe. He needs to be in a prison uniform.
Well,
because he's weaponizing his office for the violation of every constitutional right President Trump could have.
Well, before we're going to get back to the Trump, but I want to know, like, Merrick Garland back in the day admitted that he authorized the raid. He authorized the warrant or whatever it is, the documents.
Oh, yes.
He should be held legally accountable.
Oh, yeah.
Correct?
This goes all the way back. I mean, his corruption goes back to Oklahoma City. People should look at who covered up what took place at Oklahoma City. Who was specially assigned and who started getting promoted right up through the ranks after he took care of that little business.
Merrick Garland, a teacher?
Yes,
is it Merrick Garland?
Exactly. So no question. But I mean, the jury instruction is nuts. So then we have closing arguments are going to be this week. I think tomorrow.
Wednesday.
He may have already interviewed. Trump is on with Tim Pool.
Yes, they did the interview. I think they're gonna play the interview tomorrow. I don't know if it's a 5-minute or a 30-minute or an hour. But good for Tim. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a huge land. So he got Robert Kennedy, I think, on Friday, and he gets Trump on Memorial Day. So a good combo there for Timbo.
Robert, they're going to have closing arguments. They call them summation. I think they start Wednesday. When are we going to get to see the jury instructions? Have we seen the final version of them yet, or not?
No, and apparently the judge is not going to give the full instructions to the jury until after closing arguments. But he was already prohibiting the defense from presenting a bunch of arguments that they could even make in closing.
How does that make sense? You're going to have the jury listening to closing arguments, not knowing how to digest the information for the purposes of their duty.
I was going to figure, okay, I rigged this here. I'm going to rig this over here. I'm going to rig this over there. I mean, it's obvious what the dude is doing. It's been obvious from day one, while his daughter just rakes in the cash.
Well, but was it last week or the week before where their motion for directed verdict, whatever the criminal equivalent is, and the judge says, well, a jury of 12 scrupulous, insightful New Yorkers, they won't fall for the lies. He not adjudicated?
Biden is already going to be doing a press statement. So is he signaling to the judge? I guarantee you, Biden is not doing a national statement because he thinks Trump is going to get acquitted. He's sending the message, make sure he's convicted, so I can go out to everybody and say, oh, well, we can't have a felon running for our presidency. And this will be coming from one of the biggest felons in the history of man in Joe Biden. Again, Joe Biden, LBJ, but retarded. That's who he is. But the scope and scale of criminality is still there. But in previewing the closing arguments, the government doesn't have a closing argument beyond Trump bad. That's it. If you look at what the defense closing argument is, they get to take it apart. Dershowitz was like, this is easy. First of all, did the Trump order, was the bookkeeping entry false? No. The bookkeeping, a lawyer submitted an invoice. The lawyer was paid. When you're doing internal bookkeeping, that's called, which category you go to? Oh, legal services. It doesn't matter if the legal services were for reimbursement or anything else. It's payment to a lawyer in response to a legal invoice. And the person who entered that bookkeeping item admitted they never talked to Trump about it.
Well, Robert,
never talked to them about it.
It's even worse than that.
Problem.
Michael Cohen says, yeah, Trump instructed me on that payment, that $420,000. He instructed me for the Stormy Daniels payment. Oh, and I also stole $60,000 from it. I'm sure he instructed me to steal from his own payment to me. It was $30,000, but $60,000 after tax or something. I forget what it was. Oh, you know, it's
scam on scam on scam. So, I mean, the second problem is they got to show that Trump intended for that bookkeeping entry to be made and knew it was false at the time it was made for the purpose of covering up another crime. And they have none of that because they don't even have Trump intending that the item be listed that way. There's absolutely no testimony that Trump had anything to do with the bookkeeping of the item. None. They could produce zero. That's why a directed verdict should have been issued under New York law.
Is it beyond the point for a directed verdict, or is the judge going to say, I'm going to wait to see if they convict or acquit, and if they convict, then I'll come in with a directed verdict potentially?
Not this judge. I think he's already denied it, but theoretically they always have that option. But there's no way this judge does that. He's rigged this entire trial to secure a conviction to destroy Trump in the court of public opinion. It's not working because the case is garbage. Then you go to the third issue, which you got to prove that Trump issued a false bookkeeping item, even though, again, he's not a publicly traded company. So this is purely for internal consumption, which also makes it absurd at a whole other level.
Defrauding the state, Robert, and the voters. That's what it was.
Right. By how? By what? And then the second problem is that Trump didn't even know about the bookkeeping item. But the third one is, even if you can get to beyond reasonable doubt to either one of those two, you have to convince the jury that he was doing all of this to commit another crime, and they can't even identify what the crime is. Was there there's been no evidence of any tax crime and tax implications whatsoever. There's no bad basis for that. There's no basis for any of the other potential crimes other than their supposed campaign fraud on the people of New York related to a campaign. How could a bookkeeping decision that's entirely internal defraud the people of New York?
A non-public.
Cover up defrauding the people of New York. How? Nobody else is reading that. It's private. It's internal. It's not a public document. It's not a public information. It's not a publicly traded company. It's an asinine prosecution. If I was making a closing argument, say, we're only here because they assume you hate Donald Trump so much that you can't be impartial, that you can't do your job under the oath. You're going to tell the American people tomorrow, with your verdict, whether they're right or wrong. That's what this case is about, because the facts are clear, beyond dispute. And their only witness that has anything bad to say about Donald Trump is a guy who admitted he lied to every time he's taken the oath. He lied by his own admission to Congress, to courts, to the public, to everybody. A guy who admitted he routinely and regularly violated his ethical duties to his clients. A guy who admitted he committed tax fraud. A guy who committed business fraud. A guy who admitted he lied to judges, juries, and Congress in the past. A guy who admitted he extorted President Trump or was part of extorting President Trump, and admitted he embezzled from the president. No one reasonable could believe his testimony. They're just relying on your prejudice. They're just relying on you hating Donald Trump so much that you cannot enforce the Constitution of the United States in this courtroom. And that's the only the only issue in this case. Can you be a constitutional jury or not? Can you prove that you're above the prejudice they think you're guilty of? That's the only question.
I'm snipping that portion, Robert. It started at 1 hour and 13 minutes, roughly. No, and like he's on the stand admitting to perjury for 1, committing perjury for 2, admitting to larceny for 3, admitting to, I love it. I didn't pick up on it. I saw your comment and I was like, oh, I didn't realize that the first time. Taking out, exceeding, or, the limit of cash withdrawals
routine
daily.
Money laundering and financial structuring. Because when you financially structure to hide the fact that you're committing the crime of embezzlement, there's a word for that, or phrase for that. It's called money laundering. He confessed to extortion, embezzlement, money laundering, perjury, business fraud, and tax fraud.
But he also committed new crimes in real time. So whatever the statute of limitations would have been on the 2016, 2017, he could and should be prosecuted currently, or at least charged. And
that's why there's every incentive to make up stories, like his 86-second phone call to Trump's security guy that just coincidentally was connected to him wanting to get the Secret Service sicked on the little 14-year-old having fun pranking him on a routine basis. And as Dershowitz pointed out, anybody who knows Trump knows that there's absolutely no chance that there's an 86-second phone call with Trump on the phone. because the man, like, that's why it will be, people in the chat have been saying it'd be interesting to see Trump and Tim Pool. It'd be like Trump and Alex Jones. Who interrupts the other the most. The Dershowitz pointed this out. I mean, I've been on the phone with Trump, and I think I got in 8 words. It's just he thinks by externalizing, by verbalizing. He's one of those people that follows his thoughts by verbalizing them first. And so everybody knows that supposed phone call is made up. It's fictional. The bottom line is what he told his lawyer, who testified at the trial, despite the judge trying to strike it and trying to deny it and trying to restrict it, is that Trump never knew about the Stormy Daniels payoff. Never knew about it. So he couldn't have been conspiring to cover up a crime he never committed, nor could have committed.
Fantastic. I'm getting ready to hit a tweet because Bette Midler just thanked the libertarians for the moment of joy that they brought her. All right, that's Trump. That's we got Florida. We've got DC.
We got SCOTUS now.
Oh, okay. So these are you'll have to tell me which one you want to start with.
Well, the natural bridge is clearly some good decisions are coming down. Probably a big one on Trump immunity, because you've got a fake Alito scandal. Did his wife raise a flag about going to heaven or not? And did it have this significance or that significance? You got other judges making personal political attacks on him. They're nonsense. And you got Sotomayor about to cry when she goes and does a speech about that. I think she confessed that she cries sometimes when she sees the conservative judges. This is their opinion. And she hinted that there are some more coming. So there's going to be some wokester. I don't know what you remember that woman that was at the scry, the scream thing during the Trump inauguration, where all these crazy wackos got together and screamed. It was one of the funniest memeable moments in the history of man. But there's going to be a lot of that, because there's clearly some good Supreme Court cases coming down.
Donald J. Trump is now president of the United States.
Look it up to the heavens. They don't believe in God.
For the first time ever anywhere, the 45th president of the United States of America, Donald.
I would love to know where she is right now. And he said, Jordan Peterson, in one of his podcasts, he's like, can you imagine a greater level of narcissism than screaming because you disagree with democracy, looking to the heavens?